Welcome back to Bible Shorts, episode 110, A Last Meal, an Arrest and a Trial. Now the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is called the Passover, was near. The chief priests and scribes were looking for a way to put Jesus to death, for they were afraid of the people. One of the 12 disciples, called Judas, went away and conferred with the chief priests and officers of the temple police about how he might betray Jesus to them, and they were greatly pleased and agreed to give him money. So he consented and began to look for an opportunity to betray Jesus to them when no crowd was present. Then came the day of unleavened bread, on which the Passover lamb had to be sacrificed. So Jesus sent Peter and John, saying, "Go and prepare the Passover meal for us, that we may eat it." They asked him, "Where do you want us to make preparations for it?" "Listen," he said to them, "when you have entered the city, a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him into the house he enters. Say to the owner of the house, 'The teacher asks you, where is the guest room where I may eat the Passover with my disciples?' He will show you a large room upstairs, already furnished. Make preparations for us there." So they went and found everything as he had told them, and they prepared the Passover meal. And that evening he took his place at the table, and the apostles with him. Jesus said to them, "I have eagerly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer." And during the meal, he took a loaf of bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, "This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." And he did the same with the cup after supper, saying, "This cup that is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood." Jesus said to Simon, "Simon, listen, I have prayed for you that your own faith may not fail. And you, once you have turned back, strengthen your brothers." Simon Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, I'm ready to go with you to prison and to death." Jesus said, "I tell you, Peter, the cock will not crow this day until you have denied 3 times that you know me." Jesus then left the upper room with his disciples, and they went with him to the Mount of Olives. When he reached the place, he said to them, "Pray that you may not come into the time of trial." Then he withdrew from them about a stone's throw, knelt down and prayed, "Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." Luke tells us that in his anguish, Jesus prayed more earnestly, and his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down on the ground. When he got up from prayer, he came to the disciples and found them sleeping, and he said to them, "Why are you sleeping?" While he was still speaking, suddenly a crowd came, with Judas, one of the 12 disciples, guiding them. Judas then approached Jesus to kiss him, but Jesus said to him, "Judas, is it with a kiss that you are betraying the Son of Man?" Then Jesus said to the chief priests, the officers of the temple police, and the elders who had come for him, "Have you come out with swords and clubs as though I were a rebel? When I was with you day after day in the temple, you did not lay hands on me, but this is your hour and the power of darkness." Then they seized him and led him away, bringing him into the high priest's house. But Peter followed at a distance. When the crowd had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat among them, and then a female servant, seeing him, in the firelight, stared at him and said, "This man also was with him." But he denied it, saying, "Woman, I do not know him." A little later, someone else, on seeing Peter, said, "You are also one of them." But Peter said, "Man, I am not." Then, about an hour later, still another one kept insisting, "Surely this man was with him, for he is a Galilean." They undoubtedly could tell from Peter's accent that he was from Galilee and not from Jerusalem. Peter said, "Man, I don't know what you're talking about." At that moment, while he was still speaking, the cock crowed. The Lord turned and looked at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word of the Lord, how he had said to him, "Before the cock crows today, you will deny me 3 times." And Peter went out and wept bitterly. When day came, the assembly of the elders of the people, both chief priests and scribes, gathered together, and they brought him to their council. They said, "If you are the Messiah, tell us." Jesus replied, "If I tell you, you will not believe. And if I question you, you will not answer. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the power of God." All of them then asked, "Are you then the Son of God?" He said to them, "You say that I am." Then they said, "What further testimony do we need? We have heard it ourselves from his own lips." Then the assembly rose as a body and brought Jesus to Pilate. They began to accuse him, saying, "We found this man inciting our nation, forbidding us to pay taxes to Caesar, and saying that he himself is the Messiah, a king." Then Pilate asked Jesus, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus answered, "You say so." But after further questions to Jesus, Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowd, "I find no basis for an accusation against this man." But they were insistent and said, "He stirs up the people by teaching throughout Judea, from Galilee where he began, even to this place." When Pilate heard this, he asked whether the man was a Galilean, and when he learned that he was under Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him off to Herod, who was himself in Jerusalem at that time. When Herod saw Jesus, he was very glad, for he'd been wanting to see him for a long time, because he'd heard about him and was hoping to see him perform some sign. He questioned him at some length, but Jesus gave him no answer, so he sent him back to Pilate. And from that day, Herod and Pilate were friends, but before then they had been enemies. Pilate then called together the chief priests, the leaders, and the people, and said to them, "You brought me this man as one who was inciting the people, and here I have examined him, and have not found this man guilty of any of your charges against him. Neither has Herod, for he sent him back to us. Indeed, he's done nothing to deserve death. I will therefore have him beaten and then release him." But they all shouted out together, "Away with this fellow!" Pilate, wanting to release Jesus, addressed them again, but they kept shouting, "Crucify! Crucify him!" A third time he said to them, "Why? What evil has he done? I have found in him no grounds for the sentence of death." But they kept urgently demanding with loud shouts that he should be crucified, and their voices prevailed. So Pilate gave his verdict that their demand should be granted. He handed Jesus over as they wished, and he was led away to be crucified, where he died on a cross. But after Jesus was buried on the 3rd day, something no one expected happened. What happens next? Look for Bible Shorts, episode 111, The Empty Tomb.